great big expensive train set. When we were when we were doing the chase scene in Fire Walk with Me, originally he had like a Dodge Charger or something all souped up that I was to be driving, and had a stunt driver that was going to do the driving. And I said, well, you know, what about my little Chinook camper? I can stunt drive that. And he said, oh, okay. And so I drove this thing around, got it up on 2 wheels, ruined a set of tires. And David was having so much fun watching all this that he said, I got to do this too, I got to do this too. So he insisted on driving the camera car. Talking to me on the walkie-talkie. No, when you get too close, oh my God! It was really great fun. I'd like to answer any questions right now. If anybody has anything specific they'd like to ask me.
Who the hell are the Dugpas?
The Dugpas? I really don't know.
Good.
I really don't know. The Dugpas. Because there was that the same sign of magic that was on the ring that I had in Fire Walk with Me. A beautiful little design. I wish I had that ring, but I had to give it back to the prop person. That was supposedly tattooed, and I was supposed to have one of those tattoos also. That is like a very powerful magic symbol, and it really links us as inhabiting beings. See, we're not really of this earth. We're from someplace else. And the Red Room is kind of an ante-room, an in-between place between where we originally come from and this existence here. And trying to rid myself of the evils or the has anybody seen there's a late night television show, I call it Vampire Cop. What is it called? Forever Night. Very Vampire Cop. Anyway, this guy's trying to rid himself of the evil of being a vampire. And I think the character of Mike is in sort of that same vein.
Why didn't you help run that after she started off the train car? Just like if she went over and just left there.
Well, I was trying to get to Cheryl Lee because I really knew that was the real victim was going to be this time. And Ronette wasn't really that much. I knew she was going to be okay, and I really wanted to stop the really bad murder from happening. Yeah.
Did you all as actors have any idea where the scripts were going, or was each one a surprise to you?
They were such a surprise that when I would arrive at the studio, they would never fax a script to me or anything like that. I live in the Northwest, and we filmed most of the series in an airplane hangar in Van Nuys, which remarkably kind of looked like the Northwest. I don't know how they did it. When I would arrive at the hotel, I'd get a script that usually would only have my lines in it, my side, they call it, and I had to memorize that. And then when we would shoot the scene, I'd turn the script back in, and they'd shred the script. They actually had a shredder down there. One of David's very favorite sayings is, "Loose lips sink ships." And so it is always a mystery and fun. No, we played it backwards. For example, Fire Walk with Me is really Im Thu Ko Rife. Now, if you tape that, just like I said it, and then play tape backwards, it would come out, "Are you walking with me?" Whatever. And we'd have to walk backwards, so it looked like we were walking forwards when they put the film around. The guy who was most adept at that, it was little Mike Anderson. And it was one of the tricks that he had learned way back when he was performing wherever he was performing. He used to, he had a little station wagon that he lived in, and he'd go from town to town on the East Coast and do things. And one of the things he did was, that he learned to do was read scripts backwards. He could actually pick up a script and he could read it from the back to the front, and it would be perfect, and all you have to do is turn the tape around and then there would come. Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Yeah.
Was Mike in fact a doppelganger spirit, or was there one spirit? Like Craig pointed out in the Wrapped in Plastic, in the TV series, you appeared to be benevolent, but in the Walk with Fire movie, towards the end, in the last scene, you in fact appeared to be, totally benevolent.
Well, Mike is not of this world, and that can be scary sometimes. It might have elements of good in it, but since it is alien, it is alien.
Oh, thanks for answering.
Any more questions? Well, thank you so very much for coming.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one more thing. We're talking about episode number 29. Let's shoot for episode 30, because I've been told that if there are 30 episodes to anything, then it can go into syndication.
What do you eat for lunch?
First thing I have to say is Bob was an accident. Bob was never, ever there from day one. It was a whole unbelievable accident. It basically happened during the original pilot. I was a crew member. And I was the on-set dresser in the art department. And we were doing the shot of the day in Laura Palmer's bedroom. And I was tweaking the bedroom. And the camera was in the doorway. David was out in the hall. And David was like, jokingly said, "Frank, you better get out of there, you're going to get caught in the camera." And I kind of looked at David and went, "Okay." And then he kind of like went, this blood vessel burst in his head. And he said, "Frank, get down at the end of the bed, just crouch down there and act scared." And I went, "What?" "Just act scared." So that was like how Bob began. That was the initial, and then the wheels kept turning. The wheels kept turning. And I guess David, at the end of that day, in order to make sense of me being shot at the end of the bed, he added the scene at the end of the pilot, this was never scripted, where Grace Zabriskie, Laura's mom, is laying on the sofa and she's chain smoking, and she suddenly jets up and says, "Leland, I saw him." That was never in the original script, but he added it on at the end of that day to make sense of what he shot with me at the end of the bed. So this was like another thing that kind of got the wheels turning. Where it's the last shot of the day, Grace Zabriskie's chain smoking. She's whacked out. Her daughter's dead. She's wondering what the hell happened, the whole thing. So she's laying on the sofa. There are 3 meters on the back wall where the sofa is. I'm clear across the room, being a crew member, holding cigarettes in my hand for her to do each take. So I'm standing there. She laying on the sofa. She jets up. She says, "Leland, I saw him." David goes, "Great. How was that for the camera?" So the camera guy says, "Well, it was really great, but Frank was in one of the mirrors." And David went, "Wow." We couldn't have planned it better. So this is where it kind of all started, with the Bob character. And it just, I never knew that I was going to be in the series. It was kind of like one of those things where they call me at the last minute and say, "Could you be at this, on set, we need you." And I go, "Well, what am I going to do?" And they go, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Does David know?" They go, "I guess." So I walk in and I go, "David, what am I doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm not sure yet." And then be 5 minutes before camera was rolling. "You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this." And then he'd go, "You know what to do, Frank." It was never scripted, it was never anything. It was like all at the spur of the moment kind of thing. It was a great experience. I know you guys have questions, so I'd love to hear your questions. Yeah.
Was that the first David Lynch project you'd ever worked on?
As far as an actor's concerned?
Well, as a crew member.
No. I met David when I was working at DEG for Dino De Laurentiis, and David had moved into my office space after Blue Velvet, and I kind of got to be friends with him and got to be friends with his daughter, because his daughter was his secretary at the time, and friends with Joanna and Patty Norris, and linked up with Patty Norris, who's his production designer, and they were getting ready to do One Saliva Bubble at Dino's, and Dino kept not, making a commitment about money, so David pulled out one day, and he left, and his first little project that he did was The Cowboy and the Frenchman. It's a short film. It was done for French TV, actually, but I think it is available on video. And I was like the entire art department for this little short film, and that was like my first experience with him. Yeah.
I guess everybody knows this, except me. Could you help us with the image of the horse?
God, there's a lot of. It's a lot of things. Yeah, I think it has to do with whatever Leland was slipping into the warm milk. I think it's just. I don't know whether it is drugs or whether it is a symbol of something. Because I also had a tendency when you look at The Killing of Maddie, and there's a shot of me with Maddie slow dancing in very, very slow motion, and there is also a kind of a horse thing going on between me and Maddie, and I don't know if that was meant to happen or what. It has something to do with, I think, Leland and the drugs that were being put in her milk.
The Red Room, shot was that in the last TV episode? I'm just curious, was it one room and angles going to be switched?
It was one
Or was
room.
there really a lot of?
One room.
Okay.
One big red box.
Was that scene?
Well, it was difficult because we had to do, like, Al was saying, our entire dialogues had to be learned backwards. And then we had to walk, all the actions had to be backwards. The flame throwing that I did in that scene was all backwards. Everything was backwards. So in that respect, it was difficult. Because it was difficult getting your thought process working backwards. I mean, it's hard enough working forwards.
Bearing in mind that your image in the mirror was unintentional, I mean, were you doing something that the viewer can't see, or were you doing something in particular that made it so captivating for David Lynch?
I think it was just the image. The fact that there was this mirrored image.
Do you remember what you were doing?
I was probably just standing there and smiling or something really weird. it was, you know, because we never really discussed it when we go in and film the series. We never really discussed Bob. The only time I think that David and I ever really discussed Bob was doing Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and we were doing the Red Room scene. And, you know, we were talking about Bob as being the bad seed. He was the bad seed of the group. And it didn't matter to him how much trouble he caused, whether it was in the limbo world or whether it was in the real world. He just didn't care. He was, you know, an obnoxious punk who doesn't care what kind of havoc that he wreaks in any world. And he's out to have fun. He doesn't care about the consequences because he knows he's not going to worry about them. But that's the only kind of discussion we had about Bob, or how to play certain scenes with, you know, restrained anger and stuff like that. But other than that, there was nothing really discussed about Bob and about the mirror thing. Another thing too is I think that another thing that came along with Bob was I don't think that David, well, you know, David works this way where he doesn't know a lot of the times when he's actually making it where it's really going until he sees something happen, you know, and it starts to make it different. It starts to twist it a little bit. And I think another thing that did do this is because originally Bob was the killer. But when we were actually doing the murder scene on stage on a set, there was one part of me that I did, because I didn't know who Bob was either. None of us did. So I didn't know really how to play him. So when we were doing the killing scene, I was playing him almost as if after the killing or during the killing, it was almost erotic to Bob, but he felt sad about what he did. So there were points when in the actual thing that we did in the murder scene on the series in the train car, where after it was over with, there were some of the screams turned into sobs and crying scenes. And I think David picked up on that and went into another direction where it was actually Leland feeling remorseful after it was over with, after he had done this horrible act. Like, oh, wait a minute, what have I just done here? Whereas Bob would have never done that, you know what I mean? So I think it was one of those series and things that just, every time we did something on stage, it evolved into something totally different in David's head. You know, it would lead him to another realm, another direction.
I have another question. What type of screen did you train as an actor?
Years ago, yeah, I was at San Francisco. I was a theater major, but I had never done any film work.
So what I was going to ask is, had you done anything of that nature as prominent as a character as Bob is in that type of feature before?
No. Because basically, I moved to LA. I was, you know, basically a bum. I was traveling all over the world. I was a bum.
I mean, because you know, hearing you and hearing you talk and watching, you're not anywhere near as intense a personality as Bob. How is that?
Well, it's a great release. I mean, it's like therapy. Yeah, that was another thing that when Cheryl Lee and I would, we were getting ready to go into the playpen for the murder scene, and the Maddie scene, which were two really horrific scenes to do. And I said, look, we're going into the playpen. It's playtime. But it's really amazing how releaseful that can be. It's like primal therapy. To go in and be able to act that with an excuse. And get away with it. You know, I mean, that's what's great. I would go home driving after one of those evenings of screaming and killing and torturing, and I would go home, wow. I really feel really good. You know, I was like really relaxed. It was great. It was a great feeling. After. During it, it was scary. I mean, we'd go to the makeup trailer to remove our makeup, and we'd be like shaking because it was like such an incredible energy going on.
I think the series could have really continued, or had David still done that stuff, or was he just kind of dragging it out?
I think the series could have continued had ABC been behind us a little bit more. They weren't really with us. You know, they were fighting us all the way. The only person that was with us was Bob Iger. That was it. He was on our side, but you know, they just, and as much press as Twin Peaks gave them, they still weren't behind us, you know, to help us out. And I also think that David was so busy doing features that he wasn't as involved as much as he would have liked to have been, because he was so busy and so swamped. But had he been more involved with the storylines and more of the script, and had ABC given us 100%, you know, I think it would have still been on. But they weren't there for us.
This may seem like kind of a tangential question, but did your facial muscles ever cramp up?
One hell of a sneer.
No.
The scene where Madeline gets killed
Yeah.
is my favorite scene of the show. How long did that? Well, it is. It's so intense.
Someone's got a problem.
I mean,
That was
that
an
show was the most depressing program I've ever saw, ever seen on TV. It
That-
was so depressing. And I was just wondering, how long did it take to film that?
It took us all day. First of all, nobody knew who the killer was. So when we did that scene, there were 3 people killing Maddie. So that the crew wouldn't even know who the killer was. So there was Bob, there was Ray Wise, and then there was Benjamin Horn. And Cheryl Lee had to get killed by all 3 of us. She was like meat. By the end of the day, she was like a rag doll. But no, we had like, it was unbelievable, because all of us had to do the scene for the master and then do close-ups, and then Cheryl Lee had to do it with all 3 of us, so that the crew wouldn't know who did it also. We had no idea. We just had. Right.
So none of the cast members knew until it actually aired.
Yeah, it was all a surprise to all of us. I didn't know. No one knew. No one knew at all. Cheryl Lee didn't even know. The only one who knew was Mark Frost and David Lynch. And Jennifer Lynch, she knew.
What you had said about David and the whole creating as it evolved,
Right.
do you know, or did you know then where or how he was going to present the Bob character?
Mm-hmm.
Or more or less, how is he going to the killer presented in the show? I mean, Bob, they created such a path for Bob.
Right,
He was a guy that lived across from New Zealand.
Right.
He's been inhabiting New Zealand and
Right.
Nora for their whole life.
Right.
Did that all happen after the fact?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, most of the time, Bob was never scripted in the scripts. It was very rare that it was something that was scripted.
Right.
It was something that was either spur of the moment or David thought of it at the last moment kind of thing.
So originally it was just a killer.
Exactly. Because like when we did the original pilot, Al was telling about that one scene that, this was after he had shot me at the end of the bed. He had also shot that scene with Grace Zabriskie sitting on the sofa. Well, then later and later, during the process of filming it, ABC kept saying, David, you've got to have a killer in this. You've got to have an ending. You've got to have an ending. Because it just didn't have anything. It just left people hanging.
But that's what made it so great.
Exactly. But ABC said, you've got to have a killer. You've got to have a killer. Well, at the last minute, even when we were doing hospital stuff, there were times when I was doing my job at the hospital, and David would look at me and go, Frank, this was after the bed scene and the whole thing. He'd go, Frank, see that stretcher down there? At the end of the hall. Run down there and move it. And I'd run down the hall like a fool. He'd be rolling camera. And I didn't know it. Then he'd go, okay, move it out of the way. Now, run back. I'd run back. And he'd roll camera. And I never knew this thing. Well, then he added the scene with Al, showing the picture of the one-armed man and doing this whole thing. Well, the day that we were doing the town hall scene, which was actually the last day of filming on the mainland here, and the following day we were going to Bainbridge to the Kiani Lodge to do the Great Northern stuff, interiors, because that's where the Great Northern interiors were. And it was actually Josie and Jack Nance's exterior was their house. We were getting ready to go there. We were doing the town hall scene. Well, I was doing my job at the town hall scene, and I was standing next to David. He was like over here, and Debbie Tretnick, who was his secretary, was over here, and I was standing there talking. And David leans over and he goes, Debbie, did you give Frank a scene yet? And I kind of like, scene? What do you mean, scene? Yeah, did you give Frank a scene yet? Debbie went, no. Well, you better give it to him. We're shooting it after lunch. And I kind of like went, yeah, it's probably, like one word or one line, the whole thing. So then Debbie comes, brings me the scene, and it's like this huge scene in the spoiler room. And it's like this huge scene with Kyle, Michael Onkeene, Alice, the one-armed man, and Bob is a reality in this scene. And he plays this whacked out, really schizophrenic, kind of drugged out kind of creature who works with the deformed people in the hospital. And he's like really out there. He's like playing with candles in the basement of the hospital, and he's got this mound of dirt. And so they said, well, we're shooting this after lunch. So I look at this scene, and it's like a long scene. And there's like this monologue that Bob has to do. And David's going, well, see this, we do this scene, and see these 4 lines here. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, that's a song, Frank. Make up a tune. And I went, what? He goes, those are lyrics. Make up a tune. Just make something up. So I was totally flipping out. I was like totally flipping out. Here I was, a part of the crew for like months. They're running around looking for a location. They hadn't even had the location for this scene yet. We're running late. It's like now it's probably 11 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. We have to catch the last ferry to Bainbridge at 1:30. We're still, trying to shoot this stupid scene. So I didn't know what I was doing. And then I thought, here I am. I'm a crew member. If I'm horrible, everybody's gonna laugh at me. I'm gonna be like this big joke. Like a real big joke doing this scene. So it was like every ounce of energy, every ounce of everything was like drawn up. I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Did you use cue cards?
Oh, yeah. That, Chrissy did cue cards for me. Because I hadn't had enough time to learn the lines. So she did cue cards. This room was so small. And the first thing David does is goes, Chrissy, get out of here. I went, there goes my cue cards. It was scary as hell. But that's kind of like how Bob all kind of fell into it. But then he was a reality. He was a drugged out weird character.
Well, I think I'd have to say for everyone in the room, you did a great job.
Questions? Yeah?
I have a question about the plan to be a good
Uh-huh.
like Bob last year going over you said that Van Horn, Nealon, and Bob all three had shooting of killing her.
Right.
And I know it sounds really morbid, but did you all kill her the same way?
Uh-huh.
Did you all kill her was all
Yeah,
the same?
everything was kind of choreographed, and all of us did the same thing.
So I think that would be that.
Yeah, we all did the same thing. We all did exactly the same thing.
Do you remember the lines from the basement scene they sang?
Yeah, where are my cue cards? Well, the song was heads up, tails up, running for you scallywag. Nightfall, morning call, catch you in my death bag. That's it for the song.
In the context of reality, what is your sense of how people experience you when you go to the supermarket?
Trepidation. Yeah, they'll stare at me.
How do you feel toward them? Do you feel?
I'm flattered. I mean, it's flattering. I mean, it's a compliment. But people are, they kind of like don't, I can always tell when they've acknowledged it, because but then they're kind of like freaked out by it. And they kind of like wait before they like come up and say something. What's real interesting, and in fact, I just told David Lynch about this the other day, is I work part-time at this antique shop in LA, and across the street from this antique shop is a real-life Bob. It's really weird. It's real weird. It freaks me out. I mean, he's like real-life Bob. He's skinny, he's got long, gray, dirty hair, parted in the center, and he lives in, this is another thing that's like so bizarre about it, is that he lives in this green building. There's a neon sign that's broken out in front, and it's called the Blackburn Lodge. Swear to God. Swear to God! And every now and then I'm like at work, and he's like really whacked out. I think he's like, something's wrong. He like walks around like this. Great research. He walks around like this. And he'll come to the window of the antique shop. And he just stands there and stares. And it freaks me out! Totally. And David like flipped out when he heard about this. It's weird. It's really weird.
It's not like digital.
No, I'm trying to get a picture of it. With a Blackburn Lodge. He might put me out of a job.
Why do you feel that ABC did not pick you?
I think they just thought it was a little too weird. You know, a little too wacky for them.
But they got a response.
Absolutely, but ABC is just strange when it comes to new television. You know, I just don't think that they understood what was happening. I mean, the Twin Peaks changed the face of television, I think.
And how is it that they agreed to do it in the first place?
Well, I think that they agreed to do it with some trepidation, though. I mean, they weren't wholeheartedly behind it. I mean, there was lots of... They would never give us a full season. They would go, oh, okay, you got 6 episodes. Oh, okay, you got 13 episodes. Oh, okay, well, let's give them 18. You know, they never committed. They never said, oh, here's a second season full. You know, it was just they were never upfront and honest, I think. Well, a lot of David, first of all, David shoots like mad. When he shoots, and there's a lot of stuff that was not in when he started walking away. David has a tendency to really shoot a lot of footage, so that he has a lot to work with it, in the credit, but a lot got cut out. And as far as something happening with ending it all, I have no idea. Al and I were talking earlier that we think it would be great to have that third part of that trilogy, whereas, the original pilot is the first, then Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me being the second, and then have a wrap up, have an end, and find out what all we'd love to find out ourselves.
In the first season, before we the second season, there was some question as to whether you might have to send percentage of Mark Ross was on mentioned that they edited some of the they got renewed and got canceled, they filmed it and
Right.
had they really done it?
Well, I'm sure that they had something up their sleeve. I have no idea what it was, but I'm sure that they had something up their sleeve. Whether or not they would have maybe used that original thing that they had shot during the original pilot with Al and I, and maybe Bob being in reality, I have no idea. But, I'm sure that they had some sort of resolve happening.
What did Bob do to seem to drift like
Oh. Yeah. Bob has all sorts of all sorts of power. He took her away to the restroom, I think, basically. Oh, I'm sure there was. Because if you notice in the Red Room, you do see Josie's body. You don't see her face, but you do see her body sticking out of the Red Room curtain. If you notice that in the Red Room scene, oh, you didn't notice that? In the series, there's a scene in the Red Room where Joan Chen wasn't available at the time, so we had to get around that, but there was a double of Joan Chen, but we just saw the body, and her head was outside the Red Room, because we didn't have Joan Chen with us at the time, so we had her body there, but she's in the Red Room. Yeah, I mean, if you look in the Red Room, you'll see Josie's body, the last outfit that she had on, you'll see that body with that outfit. And her head is sticking outside the red wall.
You ever seen that stuff? Firewalk?
I'm sure it would be a real secret. I'm wondering if the European version is a lot different too. It's the same?
I've heard there's variations.
Because there was an awful lot cut out. The convenience store scene where I'm sitting at the table with Mike, that was a very huge scene. That really got cut to shreds. The scene that we did in the Red Room was a very long, intricate scene also that got cut to shreds. There was a lot of stuff that was cut out. Right.
Whole character. What is your impression of yourself when you see yourself on screen or like on the telly when you're acting as Bob does? I mean, it's not like, I mean,
It's not me.
I know exactly.
No. And then, I kind of like look at him and go, who is it? I mean, I now can look at him objectively. At first I couldn't look at the character. I never watched it when it first ran. I'm now starting to watch it now that it's on Bravo. And I can kind of sit back and actually aim and watch it. But I don't know who that person is. It's like when I see pictures of Bob, maybe it was because it was so long ago, but it's another character. I mean, it's not really me at all.
Did you use any research into like serial killers or mass murderers?
No, It's just my other side. Never know.
Here he goes again.
It's the white light.
Someone get the light.
Oh, yeah. All I heard is that he was doing some research for a new film. I have no idea what it is. He is interviewing prostitutes and street people and young kids, children, high school children. Pays them $100 and, like, you know, does word association. You know, so who knows what he's doing? But it's research. For something. Yeah.
Do you think any of the edited scenes will ever end up in like a director's cut or a cable special or special edition video or anything?
I think eventually it could. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the Laserdisc version. Has anybody seen the Laserdisc version?
It's the same.
Is that it's the same? I had also heard that they were talking about doing a Laserdisc version with, like a lot of other directors do, with scenes that got cut out, Fly or whatever. I don't know if that's going to actually happen or not. Eventually, I'm sure that can happen because there is talk about Dune being redone with the director's cut.
I also heard something about the FBI scene with David Bowie, the fire ring. Did that whole scene get shot or just what made it on the movie? Do you know about
No, that also got cut to shreds.
Okay, so that was shot with him in what was it, Argentina or something. That was all shot?
Right. That didn't make it into the final cut either. Because that's also a pivotal thing, too, about the powers that David has. And because he's also witnessing everything that's happening in the convenience store with Mike Anderson and I. And the plan. And then that's when he goes to the sheriff's station as a whole, a larger scene than was actually there.
How much Bob kept in personal life?
Actually, I do. Yeah, it's really affected my personal life. For some reason, people find Bob kind of intriguing. You know, it's interesting. I get it's that other side. You know, people identify with the villain. I guess it's something because normal people, or we don't act those sides of our personalities out. You know, I mean, we don't get to like do that. You know, so we're always attracted to those kind of weird, strange, wacky, villainous kind of people in movies. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of people are drawn to those characters. And I think it's because we don't have that out all the time. You know, so that's kind of like that other side of our personality. To me, that's the way I played Bob, was it was like an incredible extension of going off the deep end and having an excuse to do it.
And now for our speaker of the evening.
Okay, have I done this right? Okay. Well, I don't know about following that. That's pretty impressive. Fortunately, this breaks down fairly nicely into two parts. So I don't know how anxious y'all are to leave, but I can pretty well jettison the second part because I wasn't real wild about it anyway. So maybe it'll appear as an article sometime. That's fine. Yeah, I was a little bit anxious about presenting myself tonight for the banquet speech anyway, but after following that incredible bit with Frank, it's even more. My sole qualification for being up here is that I collaborate with John Thorne on Wrapped in Plastic, a bi-monthly magazine about the work of David Lynch in general and Twin Peaks in particular. I certainly claim no extraordinary insight into either the show itself or the phenomenon of continued interest the show has generated. So what seems amazing most to me is this festival is even taking place at all. I'm not because of anything in and of itself, but for the whole idea of a series that lasted less than a season and a half, generating this kind of continued interest, however good the series is. John and I both live in the vicinity of Dallas, Texas, and John and his wife did the smart thing and flew up here. I drove. And part of that was actually enjoy driving. I get a kick out of just getting out on the highway. But I also wanted to see the northwest part of the country up close, because closer than an airplane window would allow. So despite the extra time it took, I'm glad I drove, and let me tell you why. I got to see lots of mountains up close. See, in Texas, we don't have mountains. We've heard about mountains, and we've seen pictures of mountains, and we've talked to friends who claim to have seen mountains. But you know how friends can be sometimes. So I just wanted to see them just to see them, you know. And what I didn't expect was for my appreciation of Twin Peaks to increase at the same time. When I saw the mountain range outside of Denver, I was astonished at just how huge they were compared with the city below. And it wasn't until I got to Utah that I was profoundly struck by their immense power and their colossal volume. I was in awe. I could barely keep my eyes on the road. It was pretty dangerous. I put in some Twin Peaks soundtracks in the tape deck, although I can tell you that Vangelis works equally as well, particularly his soundtracks to The Bounty or Blade Runner. And whipping around these towering cliffs at about 75 miles an hour with Badalamenti and Vangelis blaring out of the speakers is a pretty heady experience. I'm envious of those of you who live in this part of the country, getting to see this stuff. And what made me wonder was, those of you who do live here, does the incredible beauty of the mountains just melt into the background, becoming part of the wallpaper of our lives, of your lives, or do you become so accustomed to them that you don't even notice them anymore? Or every time you see them, does some fleeting thought rise up and remind you of just how incredible they are? Because I think David Lynch didn't forget. I suppose most of you knew that he grew up here in the Northwest before going off to Europe and Philadelphia and Los Angeles and wherever else. And just as Bill Watterson never forgot what it was like to be a kid and thus was able to create the great comic strip Calvin and Hobbes, I don't think David Lynch ever forgot the beauty of the mountains and the trees and the wind and the water, and used all those elements in creating Twin Peaks. One other thing, on Tuesday night, when I was still kind of reeling from the emotional effects of the mountains and the effects that it had on me, dusk was fast approaching. And also approaching was one of these local storms that I kept driving through all day that would last a couple of minutes and then they'd be gone. I kept hitting them and again and again. And the darker it got, the more I realized that this wasn't just another one of those small local storms. It was this huge, massive storm, and it covered like a 45-degree angle as I was driving, and it took up the whole scope of the front windshield. It covered virtually the entire sky in front of me, and while the rain wasn't that intense, the lightning was, and thick bolts of lightning flashed in the sky for brief instants. And sometimes several would occur simultaneously, lighting up most of the sky, and once, incredibly, the entire sky lit up. And I was impressed with, just as I was impressed earlier with nature's incredible beauty, I had suddenly come upon nature's incredible power and all of man's accomplishments. For all of those, he can't come close to equaling the power of nature. And it's always dubious to assign personalities to impersonal realities, but if I were forced to, this massive display of lightning and storm clouds could only be considered malevolent. There was no possible good that could come from it, and certainly quite a bit of danger and possible injury. And so I'm not calling the storm evil or something like that. Its effect on me was similar. And this too, I believe that David Lynch remembered when he was creating Twin Peaks with Mark Frost. Nature's beauty and nature's dangerous power. And after seeing those, I'll never view Twin Peaks the same way again. Thank you, and thanks to Pat Shook.